Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the webinar Efficient Network Setup from Internet Data Sources. My name is Johannes Schleich. I am from the Visum Product Management in Karlsruhe. During the next 30 minutes, I will give you a webinar and showing you the functionality also live in Visum. You will have the chance to ask questions using the web chat functionality. And I will answer some of the questions right away. Others I will answer after the webinar or later via email. The agenda for today is, after a quick overview, I will show you how to import private and public transport networks from OpenStreetMap and Google Transit Feed. And thereafter I will show you how to merge these networks into one single multimodal network. For the overview, I show you a slide which I often show when I'm presenting Visum. So here on the left side you can see different data sources for private transport networks. So this can be commercial data from our PTV Vision data center. It can be OpenStreetMap or competitor software, and also empirical data like public transport surveys or GPS data. The first task of many modeling projects is to merge all these data into Visum, and then to start working on a multimodal transport model and public transport operations or many other applications. In this webinar, we're going to focus on the left side of this picture. So we're going to focus how can we get data into Visum. And in particular, we will focus on OpenStreetMap for the private transport network and Google Transit Feed for the public transport network, because these two can be available on the internet for your use. Okay, let's start with the private transport network from OpenStreetMap. So probably many of you have heard from OpenStreetMap. Some of you might use it on the browser. Some might use it also in apps for navigation. As an introduction, I want to show you a routing from here. The first part is from Google Maps, which is a pedestrian routing. So you can see it, and some part it goes through the park here in Karlsruhe, but then the suggested route goes outside the park. If you're using a navigation software which is based on OpenStreetMap, you will see that that this will find a more direct route directly through the park. So what you can see is that for some applications, the networks from OpenStreetMap can have a very good quality. So that's why it makes sense to think about importing such networks into your transportation model in Visum. If you look at another screenshot from OpenStreetMap, this is Karlsruhe. You can see that there's not only the street network, but also lots of other information. So you can see it here like parking, you can see information on land use, you also see information on the public transport network, and so on and so forth. So it's a very rich data set, which can be very useful for transportation modeling. If you want to read some backgrounds about OpenStreetMap, you can go to our PTV Compass blog. There, our colleague Sonia did an interview with Steve Coast, who was the founder of OpenStreetMap. And now let's have a look how we get the data from OpenStreetMap into Visum. This is basically two very simple steps. The first one is you have to download the OpenStreetMap data from the internet, and then you have to import it into Visum. I want to show you this with a real example, with a very small example now, how you can do that. So you can navigate to openstreetmap.org, and here you have the possibility to export the network directly from OpenStreetMap. So this is now again Karlsruhe. You can see here in the middle, this is PTV, where I'm sitting at the moment, and here we have an export function in OpenStreetMap. We can choose the area we want to export, and then we can click on export, and then the data will be prepared in an OSM file. So it just takes a couple of seconds. So it takes some more seconds. Okay, now we can see it. It saves an OSM file to my hard drive, and once this is ready, I can import this into Visum. For this, you go to File, Import, and OpenStreetMap. And now the download is ready, and I can choose the OSM file in this dialog. Just choose the file which we just downloaded. We leave all the other options as they are for the moment. We need to accept the OpenStreetMap data licensing term and guidelines, and then we can run the import. For this small network, this will just take a couple of seconds, and then the network will be opened into Visum. And we can see the same area as we have seen before in the browser. But now the good thing about this import, it's not only importing a background image, it's really importing all details which are required for a network model. So if we go, for example, on the details of a link, we can see that we have information about the capacity, we have information about the number of lanes, we have information about speed, and all these things are required for a transportation model. And also we have all required information on the turning permissions, so which allows us to run, for example, a shortest path search in this network. In addition to the network, we also have some information on points of interest. So this can be, as this example, it can be public parking, but it can also be information on land use like industrial area and other information. In addition to the private transport and the point of interest, we also, since Visum 13, can import public transport information. So we just look at an example from a line from the tram number 5. We can see that we have here the information on the line route with all the intermediate stops in our small network. But here the data is not so rich in terms of timetable information. So you can see it if you open the time profiles, you get less information and you don't have reference journeys in this example. So OpenStreetMap is definitely very rich information, a source of information for private transport network, but for public transport network it might be required to look also into other data sources, which I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes. Well, I showed you now these two simple steps, how to import OpenStreetMap into Visum. Of course, there are some options. In particular, if you want to download larger networks, you don't have to do it from the OpenStreetMap website. You can go to websites such as geofabrik.de, which prepare networks for you. Every day they prepare these networks from the OpenStreetMap website, and here you can download, for example, whole Europe, or you can download whole countries or just certain cities. If you, after downloading these larger files, if you want to cut the network before importing it into Visum, you can use tools like Osmosis, and you find information on this in our online help in Visum. Also, when importing the data into Visum, you have also some different options. You may have seen it in the dialog when importing OpenStreetMap. You can choose from different configuration sets. So you maybe just want to import the national network, or you want to import different level of details. So we have some predefined configurations here, but you also can use user-defined configurations, And here you can define your configuration in different files. And these files are the .NET file, .xml file, and the parameter file. And within these files, you can configure the import process with many details. So you can define the default fields, link types, and all other things. And this may be required if you import OpenStreetMap data, because the coding of the OpenStreetMap data can be a bit different for different cities. And so that's why it might be required to go into these details during the import process, or you might need some post-processing after you have imported the data into Visum. For our example today in the webinar, for our real-life example, I've chosen Manchester. And for Manchester, I navigated to another website which gives you metropolitan areas for the OpenStreetMap download. And just showing you the example on the website. So just a couple of seconds, because this is a very nice website in terms of the presentation of the data. But it seems to be a bit slow today. Okay, now here it is. So here we can download different metropolitan areas like Manchester, Manila, Marseille, and all others. So for many projects, this website is very convenient. What I did, I downloaded here the OpenStreetMap data onto my hard disk, and then did exactly the same import as I've shown you before for the small example. And this takes a bit of time for processing. I show you directly the result. So you can see here the network from Manchester, from the greater area of Manchester. And now we can choose different graphic parameter sets to look at the network. So we can, for example, just look at the major roads and the points of interest. So what we can see here, we have a huge information on parking. We have information on where signals are, and we also have lots of information on land use data, which can be useful, for example, for demand planning. With this network, we directly can do analysis such as isochrone analysis or accessibility analysis, which allows us to see which part of the network can be reached from a certain part in our network in a given time. And everything what I show you here is just the standard imports. So I didn't change any configuration. I didn't make any post-processing. So this is really what you would see if you just do the import with the standard parameter set. So this is our private transport network. We can see that, again, that we have some information on public transport in this network as well. But as previously, this data, as previously stated for the Karlsruhe example, this data set is not so rich for public transport. That's why we will look into another data source also for this Manchester example. And this data source will be Google Transit Feed. So what is Google Transit Feed, or GTFS? It has now been more or less renamed to General Transit Feed Specification. So this is a specification from Google. This is a format how you can upload data into Google Maps, and then this can be shown in Google Maps, as you can see here for the example of Porto in Portugal. You also can ask for routing in public transport directly in Google Maps if the data is available on their website. Now, this data can also be available on the web. This depends on the authority or the data provider, whether the data is available or not. So sometimes you have to search for the data, sometimes you have to ask operators whether they have this kind of data available. Again, you find on the Google website, you find a couple of Google Transit feeds which are available directly for download. So there's lots of information from United States, but also from Europe, and many other examples. Canada, you have, well, I've seen, also Manchester, Israel. So there are many Google Transit feeds available. There are also other websites collecting Google Transit feeds from other cities. Again, here I can download the data for Manchester to my hard disk. So this is now 17 megabytes of data with all details also on timetables and all other things for the public transport network. Again, the import takes a bit longer, so I'm directly showing you the results. But before I just show you how you can do the import. For the import, we have written a script which is part of the standard installation. And you go on the script menu, Visum add-in, and import Google Transit feed. And if you do this, it will open again a very simple dialog. In this dialog, you have to choose the source directory, so where the data is, which I just downloaded, and you can restrict the information to certain dates if you just want to import one date and not the whole full year or the full data which is in the Google Transit feed. Again, the import takes a bit of time, so that's why I'm changing directly to the result in Visum. So this is the result for Manchester. And here you can see this is a huge public transport network. If we zoom into the data a bit more closely, we will see that we have lots of line routes. And for each of the line routes, we have information on the timetable. So if I'm opening here the timetable editor, we see that we have every single level of detail which is required for public transport planning. For the example of Manchester, we also have information on the valid days. So we have different valid days for different trips. So this is, for example, it seems to be like a Sunday service, and other valid days may look a bit different. So this is a Saturday service, for example. However, what we can see, it looks a bit strange. So all the links between the stops are just straight. We can guess more or less how the street network looks like, but we don't have a realistic street network here. So it's obviously the case because we haven't merged this into a private transport network. That's why we have such simplified view on the network here. This is why we look in the next step into merging the private and the public transport networks. So the goal is we have some raw data from public transport, for example, as we have it in our example from the Google Transit feed, and on the other hand, we have a detailed network for the private transport. Now the goal is to merge these two networks. So what we want to see is that the buses are really driving on the street network and that they are not driving on these abstract links as we have seen it before from the Google Transit feed import. For this, we have another add-in, which is called IMPORTTRANSITSUPPLY. And this, I would show you a bit how this add-in works. So a more simple approach would be, and this is how many people have done it in previous times, they were first looking at the stops, and then they were matching the stops on links or on nodes. And then the next task was to find the route course for the given stops. And as you can see in this example here, you can see that this is probably not a realistic line routing. And if we run our approach, which we have in Visum since 12.5, roughly 2 years now, we have a more sophisticated approach of matching. Here we generate multiple match candidates per stop. So for this stop we just were looking at here, we're not looking just into one possible stop point location, we look into different ones, and then we generate different line route variants for each of the stops. And then finally we choose the most plausible or the shortest route course for this specific line route. And in this case we would probably find this correct line route compared to the previous more simple approach which required more post-processing. Okay, so and this process in Visum is again a rather simple approach. You open the dialog for the import transit supply. What you have to do is you have to match the transportation system set between the different networks. You have to choose some parameters on the matching algorithms, and then you can then it will automatically run. So now I'm opening again our OpenStreetMap network to show you the dialog. So it's again under scripts, Visum ADDIN, import, and here we have import transit supply. So here the first thing is to choose the Visum version which contains the public transport network, in our case the Google Transit feed. And now we need to match the transportation system between those two networks. And well, we can write it manually, but we also can ask Visum to load the Google Transit feed data and to read which transportation systems are existing. And then we can match these to the private transport network. So if we look at the last line, we have here the bus, and we can say okay, for the links we choose the transportation system bus, and the line route, of course, will also be a line route for buses. With the last option, create links, we can allow Visum to create links in case Visum doesn't find an appropriate link. This is in particular important, and we will see it also for Manchester, if you have some regional lines where you don't have a private transport network. Then Visum will automatically create new links for these line routes. Again, the import takes a bit of time for processing. That's why I've prepared this for you for the example of Manchester. So this is again the network of Manchester. What you can see is that more or less the boundary box of the OpenStreetMap data. And as I said previously, in this case we have some bus lines which are outside this OpenStreetMap data, and in this outside area we will see again that we have this more abstract network which directly comes from the Google Transit feed import. But if we go into Manchester, where we have a good private transport network, we can see that the buses are probably routed on the private transport network. Just opening an example of a line. And if we open this line, so just take this example here, we can see that this line is nicely routed along a plausible route. So and this was again just using the standard configuration from the matching algorithms. So yeah, so these are actually just very simple steps to create this network. But again, I have to be clear that it depends on the data quality from the import, in particular from the OpenStreetMap import. And just to give you an example where the matching didn't work very well, is this example here. So you can see there are some stops in the middle of nowhere and just downtown. These stops come from the OpenStreetMap import, and we can see some lines which have a bit strange routing here at this part. And the reason, probably I'm not an expert of Manchester, but if I'm activating the background images, the area images. The reason is probably that here between those two nodes, buses are allowed to drive. So it looks like that there is a possibility for buses to pass through this section. But in the OpenStreetMap data, or after running the import from the OpenStreetMap data, this was not recognized in Visum. So this is an example where some post-processing would have been required. So this could be changing some import parameters from the OpenStreetMap import, or it could be adding these kind of links after the import. Again, just to give you a feeling, of course, these import functions will help you a lot, but you can't get your multimodal network within just 20 minutes like I did now during the webinar. So some post-processing will be required, but it's much, much less compared to earlier times where you had to create the network manually, where you had to do all the matching from public to private transport in a long process. So this is now much easier. Okay, so if we look at the network statistics for this network, we have seen it's possible to import nearly 300,000 links in a couple of minutes working time and maybe a bit longer waiting for the import process. Also in the public transport, we have imported more than 1,000 lines with nearly 30,000 stop points and more than 100,000 vehicle journeys. So these are quite impressive numbers given the short period which are required for this import. Okay, to summarize this, we have seen for the example of Manchester how easy it is to import private and public transport into a single network. The steps, as you can see from the dialogues, are very simple. Just import the OpenStreetMap data, import the Google Transit feed data, and finally merge these data into one single network. And again, showing you the slide from the beginning. So this is the way how you can do the first part of each project much faster, the importing all the data into Visum, and then you can concentrate on these things which are more exciting. You can concentrate on the real problems, the real project. You can do your multimodal transport model, you can do public transport operations or traffic impact studies and so on and so forth. Okay, this was the end of this webinar. I hope it was interesting for you to see how you can import data from internet sources into Visum and directly use them for your applications. If you're interested in more information, you can go on our website to download a trial version or to book a training. So next trainings are in Birmingham in end of March, also Toronto end of March, beginning of April we have a training here in Karlsruhe, and then in May there are further trainings again in Karlsruhe and Philadelphia. You also can go to the PTV Visum installation to look at examples and tutorials. And if you want to meet us directly, you can attend our user group meetings. So the next ones are end of March in Bogota, and then our huge Shaping Transportation Conference and user group meeting in Berlin end of May. In addition, I want to point you to some more webinars which are of interest. So you find all of them on our website. So the next Visum webinars will be 11th and 13th of March. We have master planning with PTV Visum. There I'm going to show you how you can use your network to build a multimodal demand model. Thereafter, we have a webinar on scenario management. So this will be the logical next step. So how you can use your Visum model in real projects with lots of different scenarios, and in particular for our German clients, we have a German webinar for interfaces for public transport, for specifically more German interfaces. In addition, if you have further questions also in the next days, you can send me an email. Now I want to thank you for attending this webinar. Now I'm going to answer some questions in the chat, and I wish you a good day. Thank you.